Working Cows Podcast, episode 348. This episode is brought to you by Wineglass Ranch. This episode is also brought to you by Olson Ranch, LLC.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. And this episode is brought to you by the Wineglass Ranch. Cattlemen, mark your calendars for Wednesday, April 10th, 2024, your opportunity to get your hands on some low-input foraging experts from the Wineglass Ranch. These cattle come from a genetic base of Angus and Hereford Cross. They are a low frame score, 3 to 4, low milk output, easy keeping. These girls work 365 days a year, and they are ready to go to work for you. So if you're interested in this, you'll have an opportunity to get your hand on some of the 300 head of bred cows that will sell in April at Oglala Livestock. So mark your calendars for the second Wednesday in April and be on the lookout for more information coming soon. If you're interested, you can get more information at www.wineglassranchinc.com. Very excited to be joined today by Glenn Elzinga. Glenn is one of those guys that I should talk to more often than I do. Just a fascinating character, guy who is, as I introduced him at the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition's Soil Health Conference, I said that Glenn's a problem solver. Glenn's a guy who looks at 14 head of livestock, which for their operation equaled about $50,000 of lost revenue, killed by wolves in one grazing season, and looks at that and figures out, just by looking at a Charlie Russell picture when his family was going out to sing Christmas carols, he looks at a Charlie Russell picture and the thought occurs to him, why don't we live out there with our cattle anymore? And they go out and they live with their cattle and they solve the predation issue for their herd. And so he's a problem solver, and just guys that think that way are really important for us to learn from, and I really appreciate that. And if you want to go and check out that previous episode, it'll be linked in the show notes page for today, which is workingcows.net/348, and there will be link to Glenn's previous episode, which can be found at workingcows.net/119, workingcows.net/119. There will be linked today's show notes page to that episode as well. But really excited for this conversation with Glenn. So Glenn, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows Podcast. Welcome back.
Oh, it's fantastic to be back, Clay. Great to visit with you again.
Yep, really looking forward to this conversation. And I think that we have been in American agriculture maybe lulled into a bit of a stupor by markets and favorable conditions in some places. And I know that's a real broad generalization, and some people are not experiencing as favorable of a condition currently. But what I would like to discuss with you a little bit is about kind of the hope that you see in agriculture and the opportunity that exists if people are willing to change the way they see things. And I know that is the biggest if in human history, because there is very little in the world that is harder to change than the human mind. So we will recognize that from the outset. Where would you start? What are some of the things that need to change as far as the way we look at things in order to realize the hope that we see, that you and I both recognize is present in agriculture? What are some of the things that we have to change the way that we see these things in order to realize that hope?
There's this analogy about the frog in boiling water. And I feel like in agriculture, in Western agriculture in these countries, Canada, the U.S., partly Mexico, we're the frogs in boiling water. And the water is not quite boiling yet because we're not quite dead. But it's it's become uncomfortable, and this is why you see these symptoms pop up. Like I was reading stats the other day on suicide rates. Occupational suicide in agriculture is at an all-time high right now. It's some numbers I looked up are showing that agricultural occupational suicide is the highest occupational suicide in 2023, 2022. So obviously there's some problems, this in a world that had just seen the highest prices for grain ever. And now, those things are coming back down, obviously. We're right now in a cattle cycle that's the highest prices in cattle since the beginning of time. Okay. I mean, it's not just in the past decade. It's not just in the past century. It's since the beginning of time. We have not seen commercial cattle prices this high ever. And so it's kind of crazy to talk about things being broken when markets are this high. But, the thing I would submit to you and the listeners of Working Cows is that the difference is that I think our costs are higher than you. I mean, we just function under incredible costs. I mean, we even struggle with it on our ranch. We're profitable, but we're thin margin profitable. And my wife Carol and I got to continuously look at where our costs are going. We looked at labor this week and for 2023, and this is a number that you may want to be sitting down for because it's going to blow you away for a ranch. But we spent over $500,000 on labor this last year. And actually, it wasn't. My wife would get after me for saying that. I think it was around $470,000 for ranch labor. All right. Inconceivable amount of ranch labor. And you look at what wages have done, they've just doubled. It wasn't that long ago, Clay. It was just, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we were still paying $8. We're still, and people were happy at $8, and now, we're just paying, way more than that. And I need to, I don't regret any of that. But on the other hand, you look at that labor cost, overall, and you're like, holy cow, we're sucking wind on labor, And you might say, well, I'm going to mechanize. I'm not going to have labor. I'm going to mechanize. That to me is absolutely unfruitful, because of course, the iron is inconceivably expensive. And sure, it's softened a little bit in the past few months. I've been watching it. Used iron has come down a little bit. New iron really hasn't changed. It continues to appreciate in value in terms of new paint. That used iron has come down a little bit. I saw that I could buy a backhoe for under $100,000 now. So those costs are continually exponential. Sure, fuel's lost, but overall, our cost structures are higher than ever. And despite markets being higher than ever, our profitability is probably more marginal than it's ever been in agriculture. And this is supposed to be hopeful. Podcast, Clay. But what I would submit to you first, and your readers is to look at how we got here and how long it took and what happened, what changed. Really, in my mind's eye, agriculture dramatically changed in just 70 years, just my lifetime. I'm 62. Clay, let me give you an example. My dad was milking cows in the North province of the Netherlands, a place called Friesland, in the 1930s. Those cows averaged 30 pounds a day, milk, okay, which is not very much, which is cut her head off in this day and age, right? Mm-hmm. And she weighed 950 pounds. She weighed 950 pounds. It was a black and white Friesian Holstein. Okay. Now you take that same Friesian Holstein, 1,650 pounds, 1,700 pounds is not uncommon. Okay. Rolling herd averages, if you boil them all down to, that milk per day, it could be as much as 90, right? Instead of 30. And you need that to become profitable in the dairy industry. We have 2.5 lactations as the average amount of lactations in Idaho before a cow gets her head cut off because she's burned out. She's toast, man. It's over. Okay. I asked him how many lactations they would go through. Well, he said it wasn't uncommon to be milking a 15-year-old cow.
Hmm.
So for the people that say agriculture is still the same values, still the same, still the same parameters, whether it be land or cattle, we're still growing. We're not. We're growing it completely differently than we did 70 years ago, 80 years ago. And, it's why. It's why. It's that complexity. It's that change. It's that monospecificness that agriculture's become, monocropping, minimal rotations, cow size, cow traits, and ability to just be part of an ecosystem instead of acting over an ecosystem. Those things have changed so dramatically in 70, 80 years. And I think that's where we need to go first. It's, I see this created ecosystem, where, I always go back in what we do with cattle. It's like, how were these made? What was the design? What was the original design of these cattle and the grass that they eat? What, or the ecosystem they function in, and I think of it in terms of running under 70 square miles of mountain pasture. There used to be bison up there. How did they function? What was their connection with the landscape? What was the herd unit? So I try to assemble all these clues from history to try to kind of rebuild an ecosystem. And I'm not a preservationist. I'm not trying to go back, but I'm trying to reestablish that design, back into our system, because I think that's what we've lost in that 70 years. It's that design. We've lost the design and the intent of the design of those functionalities, those ecosystem functionalities. And that's why we've gotten into these cost structures in agriculture that are unprecedented.
Yeah. We're pushing against a really heavy rock. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that ecosystem was well designed by God to function very well. And when we stop managing according to the way he designed it to work, we end up pushing against a really heavy rock to make it submit to our authority and our will, right? When we go to try and impose our will on that landscape, it fights back in a big way. And that, I think, is part of what you're describing. Would that be an accurate summary?
No, I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. It doesn't mean it's going to be easier. Because here's the deal, Clay, I find with this whole, I guess, attitude of husbandry, if you will. I like to call it husbandry instead of stewardship. I wrote a little blog post about it the other day because people have been talking a lot about stewardship, and they're talking about, in terms of cover cropping and building carbon and, even no-till, how to, grazing management with cattle. I hear the word stewardship a lot, and I'm wondering, I like it. I like where we're going here in these subcultures of trying to, return to biodiversity, trying to get water, get carbon back into the soil. I think those are wonderful things. Get animals that fit the ecosystem. But sometimes I wonder if we're really still stuck in a little bit of a production mindset instead of a mindset that says, let's become part of the ecosystem instead of acting on it. Let's join the ecosystem. So that, again, I'm not a preservationist. I don't want to go back to 300 years ago because I don't think we ever can go back. And I don't think that's what God asked us to do when integrating ourselves into his design. I think it's about seeing what our role is as part of the ecosystem. And to me, the word that really fits that appropriately, and I picked this up from just reading Wendell Berry, he keeps talking about husbanding or husbandry. And at first I was wondering why he was using that word, and he never really defined it. And I kind of came up with my own thing about why it worked in my mind. I may or may not be right, but I'm a husband. I've been married for, I think, my wife's going to kill me here. It's 36 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So 36 years of marriage to this woman. And, there's some things about being a husband in that biblical sense that really actually is akin to a life in relationship to the land. Mm-hmm. Okay. For one thing is, anybody who says they understand a woman after 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50, 70 years. I've talked to 70-year-old married people. They've been married 70 years, which is really uncommon. Okay. But if I ask that guy if he understands woman, it's almost categorical. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I would guess that his response would be, if he was honest, his response would be something like, I understand her less today than I did the day we got married. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like the more time I spend around her, the less I realize I understand.
Yeah, so you get this humility, this humility building up as the years go by, right? And I think the same thing happens to us when we have a relationship with the land. We find out every day we know less. Mm-hmm. And in reality, we're gaining knowledge. We're gaining a little bit of understanding. But as we do that, we open new doors. When we integrate ourselves into nature, integrate ourselves into an ecosystem, we see these crazy things that we've never seen before. And we're missing all those things. We're missing all those things in agriculture today, with our monocropping, with our rectilinear fields. I even see people do it with rectilinear grazing. They'll set up these high tensile paddocks all across their place. And sometimes they work fantastically. And within those parameters, you can work it out. But you've also bridled some of that nature, some of that diversity, some of that ability to be super flexible in complete respect to what nature might be dishing out to you. So let me give you an example. So we were super busy this summer. We had 2 daughters getting married. One of them didn't even tell me until 3 weeks before the first one got married. So it's like, holy cow, this has been really stressful. Because we got 300 people coming to the ranch, Clay. Okay, 300 people got to go through my house, and it's unfinished. I'm a finished carpenter all summer with a good friend of mine who is an actual finished carpenter instead of a rancher faking it, and trying to keep wife from losing it, because she's like, I got 300 people coming through my house and we're doing food. Okay. So a lot of stuff going on. And gosh, we had about 210 mama cows that were going to calve, and we moved all their calving dates to May, June. And I didn't even know how I was going to pull it off. And, I just felt like, what? We're talking about nature. We're talking about ecosystem here. We're going to go for this. And my kids were like, what? We're going to what? I said, we're going to go for this. We're going to leave them alone. Okay. It's May, June. It's after we had a horrible winter this year. It was horrible. It was humbling. Okay. Because it was very difficult. Thank God those calves were all inside the cows because they were safe there. Okay. They were 100% safe all the way through. Okay. Start calving. 3rd week of April. We got some earlies. They're showing up. A little difficult there because we're still getting blizzards. Okay. After May 1, we still got a few blizzards, but it was inconsequential because the weather would reflex to warm pretty quickly. Anyway, so we're out there calling. I told the kids, I said, how we're calving this year? And they said, how are you calving? I said, we're gravity calving. Okay. Gravity is going to have those calves hit the ground. We're not going to have anything to do with it because we used to have this paradigm where, we're calving in January, February. I'm there. I'm sleeping in a barn with these mama cows, trying to step through them, get them sorted. It's 30 below zero. We got winds coming down the pike, wind chills at 75 below zero. And we're trying to get through these calves and calves, sleepless. Got to come up with some really good alfalfa, protein, hay. Anyway, we stopped all that. We said, we're going to calve on grass. We're going to calve the way the elk do. Okay. That was that was kind of the precursor to us thinking about it. And a friend of mine, I was bumped into him in a hardware store one day. And this was, 20 years ago before anybody was talking about this. We're in a hardware store and we're buying some bolts and stuff. It's April, and it's April 15th. And I said, Dave, how's your cabin going? He said, he's cabining about 150, 200 mama cows. He's not a big operation, but, he doesn't have a lot of real estate, but, he's trying to run it tight as he can. He's by himself. He's trying to be profitable with that small herd of cows, but he owns it. They're paid for. I said, how's the calving thing going? I remember you calve around April here. He said, oh, yeah, we do. We do right about now. I said, well, how are they doing? He said, I don't know. And I looked up from the cashier and said, what are you talking about? You don't know. He said, I haven't seen it. I said, well, where are they? He said, I just trucked them all down to the desert about 2 months ago. And they're out there. I said, so you don't even know what's going on? He said, I have no idea. He said, I'm sure they're doing fine. They're good at it. They're good at it. This is the fourth year I'm doing this. They do know what they're doing better than I do. And then this Dave, he's my age. He's brought up night cabin, January, February. I mean, 5 years old, he's in the cabin barn, right? Okay. So anyway, that's what kind of got my idea going on this. It's like nature, and yeah, Dave's right. Cows know better than I do. So anyway, we're stuck doing this because it's like, I got 2 hired guys with me and my daughters, and they see a cow calving out there. They can see him with binoculars and they're like, we should go check. And I said, no, we're not going to. We're going to draw the line this year, and we're not even going to go out there. They're on a 300-acre field. We're not even going to go. We're not even going to go out there. And they said, well, shouldn't we take a spin through and make sure everything's okay? I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to dink around with it at all this year. We're not tagging. We're not banding. We're not doing nothing. No vitamin ADE. No nothing. We're going to let them handle it this year. So I couldn't stand it, Clay. Sometimes I'd get up there. If I got on their horseback, they'd all gather up. They'd see me coming. So I'd just jump on a dirt bike and just tear through them like I was traffic going by on the highway, And son of a gun, I don't see anything really wrong. And so I started noticing these weird things happen on the 300-acre pasture. Like one thing we started noticing, I don't know if you've seen this, anybody who calves in the spring probably has noticed this. I never noticed it before. But anyway, I got this bunch of calves. There's like 40 of them in a little area far away from the house. And there's 3 mama cows with them. 3 mama cows. And they're standing there. They're not laying down. They're standing there. And they're kind of pointing in all directions. They're just checking out the landscape. I don't even know what's going on. Okay. I still don't fully know what's going on. Everybody else, every mama cow else is gone. Okay. They've taken some of their calves with them, but all the newborn young calves, I can tell they're just young. They're just that kind of wobbly stage. They're all back there with the babysitters. That's what we started calling them. They're the babysitters. And it's different cows. Okay, these cows have in them something that says, you're the babysitter for today. You're going to watch these 50 calves. I'm going to go get something to eat. Good to go. Babysitter cow says, okay, I'm going to do that. They're different ones. They're rotating this crap, Clay. And I never gave them the opportunity to do this before. And some of your listeners are like thinking, this guy's a moron. He's crazy. This can't be real. But I'm watching it from day to day, and it's real. It's real. There's like 40 to 60 head of calves down there with these. And these are all the newborns who don't travel well, and they're down there. And I'm just thinking, holy cow, we don't even know what God put in these animals as far as instinct because we've never let it manifest. Mm. We've never let these things come clean and show themselves until we leave them alone.
I think, Glenn, it has to be because of the great spreadsheet that you had in the cow break room, so they all know who was supposed to be guarding the calves and babysitting the calves when, right? I mean, it had to do something with that, right?
Well, I don't know what it looks like. Okay, I'm realizing, you always get these people say, boy, calves are done. Or, I'm sorry about, they got the t-shirts that say, I'm sorry about what I said to you while we're working calves, And I'm like, that all those things feed into this mindset that cows don't really have it together and they need us.
Yep.
And when I let them do these things, Clay, I'm blown away what can manifest when I let them do these things. And, I just got to tell your listeners, hey, if you got large frame genetics in your bulls, do not do this. This is, economic suicide. You're going to kill yourself. You got to be set up for this. These are mature cows. These aren't heifers. You got to predispose yourselves to success here. There's certain things you have to do with management. A lot of people, when I talk to them about this, it's like, well, you just let them go. You don't do anything. No. You have to actually. You got to set this is husbandry. You have to set yourself up to be successful. It's part of the ecosystem. You are still a manager, and you got some decisions to make to set yourself up to let nature manifest. Okay.
Yep.
The whole Sandhills calving system.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A lot of your listeners, you've probably had a podcast about it. So I loved it. Okay. I did this about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It was a lifesaver for me. I was like, holy cow, scours are almost gone. Well, all that started coming back into my head. And it's like these calves in the nursery area, they're under birth ground. Okay. They're under birth ground for like 2.5 weeks. This is in the design. Stay on birth ground for like 2.5 weeks. Don't leave that area. Don't pick up any new bugs that you aren't predisposed for with colostrum. You just want to stay on that ground. And I don't know, none of this is all anecdotal. Okay. There's no science on any of this. I'm just observing. So, I mean, that's what kind of blew me away about this whole thing. Yeah. Is that if we just step back, get things in place to allow nature to take place, I think it's a storm. And the other thing about it is if we're willing to pay attention and listen and watch and learn, I think we're in for a lifetime of it's like marriage to me. It's going back to the husbandry. I'm so glad I'm married. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad I'm married every day. And yeah, granted, wow, we clash, but, and so do you with nature, those guys in North Dakota I was telling you about earlier before the cast, wow, they had some clashing going on, last winter. It don't matter if the calves are inside the cows when they're buried alive in a snowdrift in the middle of the winter, Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're going to clash. There's going to be tough times, but in all, if we let nature do this work, we can start taking a look at those cost structures, because how many scour calves we had this year? 0. It was 100% 0 out of 210 head. Mm-hmm. You know what our I think it was our 120 day. That's our metric for determining what our success was going through calving. We're at 97%. And, that's just letting them do it without our intervention. And these aren't weird cattle. They're just regular black cattle. Some are bred to Herefords, smaller frame. Some are bred to Black Angus, smaller frame. They're not small frame cows by any means. They're just run-of-the-mill Black Angus cattle. So it's not like that stuff has been all bred out of them. I think it's a little bit of epigenetics, that influence of the environment on the expression of genes. That's epigenetics, okay? Yeah. It's a little bit of that. We're putting them in an environment that is now natural. As a result, we can express this gene, this instinct that we didn't see before. And I think that doesn't only have to do with cows, has to do with plants, has to do with our grasslands, has to do with everything. If we just step back and try to get into our heads about how This was designed. What were the design parameters here? Let's do that and see how that works on these animals. See how that works on this grassland.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Olson Ranch, LLC. Wally Olson's hosting a sell-by marketing school online February 27th through the 29th, online via Zoom from 9 a.m. to noon Central Time each day. If you're interested, you can check out more at ranching.fyi/Olson. That's ranching.fyi/Olson. Excellent school. Always a great amount of information about finding undervalued and overvalued livestock, managing cow depreciation in your herd, and it also gives you the opportunity to take the school again for as little as $100 whenever the school is offered. You can take it again and try and get more of your questions answered as you have implemented these things, and Wally just becomes a really great resource. So again, check out ranching.fyi/Olson if you're interested in the Wally Olson Sell-By Marketing School online February 27th through the 29th. I'm becoming really suspicious of anything other than anecdotal evidence because I think all non-anecdotal evidence, or i.e. Evidence that has been arrived at through a study, that study was paid for by a company who had a vested interest in a certain outcome, and that study was conducted by an individual or a team of individuals who had a vested interest in seeing the money continue to flow to conduct more studies. Now, I know that that's probably an uncharitable and maybe unfair interpretation, but I've talked to people who've been there when those studies were conducted and understand that is the way it works at least some of the time.
It's a no-brainer. This is like cause and effect. If you look at our university system, who pays for the research? In the veterinary world, it's the drug companies. Mm-hmm. Okay, you don't get research on some crazy ass thing that Glenn's talking about in his field that is design instinct. All right, and epigenetics being expressed out in that field. You don't get any research for that stuff. There's no money funneled for that. It's the drug companies. It's Merck. It's Pfizer. They're paying university wages, okay, to do it a certain way. You just follow the money, and it's just the fact. You can just follow the money and see where the land grant university money comes from. And there's so many good people in those situations, but on the other hand, they don't exist. They don't have jobs. I see it with the USDA, in terms of the Forest Service or, who's managing grasslands or forests. It's where are they getting the money? Where's the funding come from to fund them? And, it's ultimately, lobbyists. Yep. They're saying to politicians, hey, I'm going to give you this charitable donation, but I do need you to vote this way. Mm-hmm. So it's, I'm not a big graft and corruption conspiracy type person. I'm more like, that stuff exists. We're just going to do the workaround. Yeah. We're just going to do the workaround. And despite that existing, this is still a great country, and we're just going to do this. I don't know if any of your readers have watched this show. It's a horrible show, but it was very fascinating for my wife and I. It's quite a vulgar show, too. It's called Clarkson's Farm, and it's shot in Great Britain. And it's this guy named Jeremy Clarkson, who's a would-be farmer. He's a little older than I am. I think he used to be a stunt car driver, and he had some shows related to that, made some money that way. And he said, I want to get into farming. So, I've watched every show, and granted, it is still vulgar, and a lot of it is off-color jokes, the way British humor can often be. But the thing about it, the reason I kept watching is I want to see how this unfolded. And Clay, I'm so glad we live here, because the British government's intervention in agriculture is like, if your cow's going to crap there, we want to catch that and put the manure over. It's almost to that point of control. and the permitting system. And, you know, for me, I talk about a workaround. We could still do a workaround here. You know, there's still freedom to exercise the workaround. In Britain, you go to jail if you do the workaround. It's you're off the land. They're going to fire you from your farmership, you know. And so, you know, with that, you know, with how screwed up the university system is, how much graft there is, how much, you know, payoff there is, and where the research comes from. Yeah, we still can do the workaround.
Yep.
And it's a great way of life because of that. And thank God in the cattle industry, we haven't been chickenized yet. You know, we haven't been chickenized. We haven't been piggerized. You know, those people are in balls and chains. And it's a very difficult situation because the profitability has been pretty much eat out of their complete production paradigm. And the reason they keep going is often because they're in debt.
Mm-hmm.
They're in debt. They're into the ball and chain of the same debt that comes from the producer, you know, the final end cutter of that product, you know, whether it be chicken or hogs. So they're stuck. They're absolutely 100% stuck.
Yep. And
thankfully, we're not yet there in the cattle industry, for the most part. I mean, I hear of some stuff going on, you know, as farmers and ranchers are becoming part of a vertical integration enterprise. Not good. You know, that stuff is starting to stink a little bit. And I'm realizing, oh, yeah, this is their ultimate goal. Of course, the Packers want to control the entire supply chain. Why wouldn't they? I mean, controlling the price is the key to supplying the whole thing or getting supplies through the whole thing and ensuring profitability in the long term. It's wonderful for your stockholders. It's guaranteed profitability.
Whether we're there yet or not, I have no doubt that there are individuals or groups that would like to see us get there. And you know, I think that one of the ways that we protect ourselves from that is doing some of the things that you've been doing and learning lessons from people like you who've gone down that road before. And I know it's uncomfortable to talk about numbers, and the farther west you go, the more I think we're uncomfortable talking about numbers, but I'm only going to use numbers that you've mentioned here so far on this podcast. You said that you had $470,000 to make sure Carol is comfortable. $470,000 in labor against 210 mama cows. Most people would say 210 mama cows don't generate $470,000 of gross revenue, let alone enough to pay that much in labor. So can you tell me a little bit about the production system? And I go here, I've got other notes that I think we could talk about, but I go here because ultimately this is a bottom line conversation. And we've, in gospel preaching, this is a weird segue, I know, but in gospel preaching, there is law and there is gospel. And we've done a lot of law on the front end of this podcast and told people about how bad it is and how much worse it could get. Now let's give them some gospel about how good it can be and how you can get to a point where there's enough margin in 210 mama cows to pay that kind of labor and still have some profit. So can you lay out the enterprise mix at Alder Spring Ranch to kind of set the context?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it is more than 210 mama cows. Well, not so much in mama cows. I think right now our mama cow herd is only 260 head, but we also do buy some yearlings. Right. So right now our cattle numbers are somewhere with the yearlings, with the yearling calves, with the 2-year-old calves, and the mamas. I think we're somewhere around 650 to 700 right now. I got those numbers down. It's not like, I don't know. I don't keep track for day to day where we're at because we're always rolling cattle. Okay, so you know, we're often buying some cattle that are always a long ways out. Like maybe they're only yearling cattle, maybe they're only 8-month-old. We're going to finish them on our grass finishing organic program to die at around somewhere between 24 and 26 months optimally. So we have our own branding, Clay. It's called Alder Spring Ranch, and it's completely vertically integrated. The only thing we don't do right now is cut up the meat. So that we contract with a processor in central Montana, Stillwater Packing, certified organic. We have like today, as we speak, we ship 13 head up there. It's between 13 and 15 head every 2 weeks all the way through. So that's why there's cattle always coming and going. And I don't have an idea in my head exactly where that number is at any given point in time. But of course, you got to manage these inventories because you got to keep consistent flow and flow through all the way through the system so that you don't run out of beef, okay? Because you got customers on the other end who are waiting for it, right? And up till very recently, some of them were brick and mortars. We just sunset our biggest brick and mortar store we've ever had. They were taking 110 head a year. And we're just converting that into our vertical integrated process of shipping cuts out to individual people who order on the internet from all over the country. So that's how we've taken control of that. And that's part of the reason why we have those kind of labor costs. But it's more than that. It's a production paradigm. So Clay, we don't, our equipment is pretty much, by anybody's standards in agriculture today is junk. It's 100% junk. We got a 1986 John Deere tractor. We got a 2001 John Deere backhoe. That's it. Okay. We have a few motorcycles and four-wheelers. We have 45 horses, which is not good.
Okay. Hey, you know what? That's a human resources investment because people are way happier on the back of a horse than they are on the back of a motorcycle.
If they're a girl. I got 7 daughters. They're the ones starting all the colts and all this stuff. So we use them. Like I said, we have a grazing program up on 70 square miles, 46,000 acres of BLM Forest Service land. We camp up there with our cattle for the entire summer. So there's cow camps moving and falling to cattle for the entire summer because we have wolves up there that were eating the crap out of our cattle. That's over now. And we run as much as 400 to 500 head up there in a single bunch for the entire summer. We herd them all the way through the landscape. This was addressed in the last podcast I did with you, Clay, and Extent. So if anybody wants to go back, I don't remember what number. Was that 118?
119. 119. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, if you want to learn more about that, go back to that podcast because we're still doing that. We've been doing that for 10 years now. So that's a production paradigm that costs a lot because there's people up there. Yep. There's people up there and they're working long days. A lot of times they're 14 hours in a saddle, so those costs are on the other end of it. We have this model where we convert all that grass and all those cattle. They walk 600 miles in a given summer. We've put GPS and saddlebags to see how far we've gone. They walk 600 miles in the summer to graze this country. It's unfenced. It's wide open mountain range country. And all the way through, they're putting on pounds, obviously. So our goal going into this year is to get between 2 and 3 ADGs on those cattle for the entire summer. We're changing some of our paradigms. We're always tweaking how that works, how that operates on the range. So we're hoping this year we can reach that goal to 2 to 3. Last year, 1.5 to 2. But still, if I convert that pounds of gain over the course of the year above the baseline that most people get on a rangeland yearling, which is around 1 to under 1. They're running 0.7, 0.8. A lot of people are. Some people are getting 1. Some people are getting 1.2. If we can get from that 1.5 to 2 into that 2 to 2.5, even conservatively, just in terms of the cash value of what that weight is, that's about $110,000 in our pocket that enables you to pay for that help. So that's how that whole thing cash flows. We're just trying to generate enough pounds up there to be able to pay for that help and keep the cattle alive, obviously, from wolf predation, because we're losing a lot to wolf predation for a while. We're losing some to just loss. We're losing a bunch to poison, larkspur, death camas, those things. Now those losses have pretty much been mitigated entirely. And it's just because we're managing. We're there with the cattle. This is management-intensive grazing on horseback, Clay. That's what we do up there. So anyway, that's why the people. The other part of the people is that everybody is involved in the beef production paradigm. So what beef production paradigm is Okay, there's just about everybody on the ranch now is fully trained on how to identify fat cattle. So this every 2 weeks, we're bringing them into the corral. We bring the whole herd. Right now, there's 275 head in that herd. We bring them all into the corral, and we walk through them. And we just pick the ones that are going to grade choice, or they're going to grade low prime. Some are going to grade select. We're going to screw up. Okay, we're going to have those. But like this last week, out of 15 head, 19, or out of 15 head, 14 went choice. Only one went select. So it's just a trained eye. You're looking at tailhead deposition. You're looking at brisket development. You're looking at rib cover. You're looking at, evenness along the top line, fill along the top line. You're looking at pin bone, how far the pin bones are gone. You're actually feeling it on some of them. Some, we've been around these cattle since they're born, so they get very used to us, even though their mamas are completely wild animals, and we'll kill you. Okay. But these yearling cattle, because we live with them for the entire summer, are pretty dang used to human presence. And, you can feel that and determine it, and you can see it. That escutcheon area totally filled out, where there's low hair on a heifer. That totally filled out, starts to bulge. You can make quantitative and qualitative calls there based on the deposition there, and you can see how that thing's going to be on the rail. And that is really what we're all about. It's about, raising a quality beef product that then we can market consistently online, that people have repeatable results, that, the flavors are the same, consistency is the same, texture is the same in terms of, tenderness. The confirmation of a ribeye. We always cut them the same way. They're never different. We always have the tails on. People know what to expect. We always leave thick rinds on the ribeyes, and on the New Yorks, people know what to expect. They know what a fatty, when they order a fatty ground beef, they know what that is. So anyway, that's the beginning of the qualitative and quantitative identification of finished cattle. So that then goes on a truck that we put together this morning at 5:30 in the morning. And we load those cattle up right out of our corral. They've been on grass all their lives. They were in a corral to get weighed and get sorted, to get on a truck. They go on a truck. So these are all my kids. These are, right now, I got 3 really solid employees that have been with me for 4 solid employees that have been with me from anywhere from 2 to 8 years. And they've all gotten good at this identification. So they're good at loading. They're good at handling the cattle. They're good at low stress stockmanship. So they can put them all in that trailer, and off the trailer goes to Stillwater packing. And then you got to integrate all those attributes into Stillwater. This all takes time. This is all this labor. I'm talking about, trying to get all that quality to follow through post-mortem. I talked to a lot of producers. They're raising grass-fed organic beef, and they're like, okay, we got them off to the packer. We're good. Then I talked to this guy the other day. He's in the business. He's in the grass-fed organic beef business. And he calls me. He says, Glenn, hey, so do you think it's going to make a difference if we just, the packer, has got a kind of soupy mess this winter in his freezers, where we're going to store that beef before it ships out? The boxes are going to get soaking wet because there's all this effluent and all this stuff that flows over the freezer floor. And so he wants to freeze all the boxes before we put them out so they don't soak up. And I couldn't even listen anymore. Okay, because wait, this is something you just put your whole life into, okay, with this animal. The husbandry of this animal, the link up with nature, allowing design to be manifest, allowing the beauty of this animal, the honor to put it into a place where people are going to be able to celebrate in the wellness that you've put into it. And wait, you're going to drop the ball right now and let them freeze the whole thing slowly, let those ice crystals nice through your meat, and all your cell walls will be damaged. You're now going to have meat that's tough and stringy, a little bit like jerky after your thawed, and plus your boxes are going to be dirty. And I'm like, inconceivable. I don't even get that. Anyway, So that's a lot of my work. It's a lot of the crew's work is curation of the whole product all the way through till it hits the box. It takes a lot of time. We all go down there on Mondays to ship beef. I got like anywhere from 4 to 10 of us down there packing beef and dropping steaks in boxes and carefully wrapping them so they don't crack. It's fine crystal to us because the steak has been raised by each of them. I mean, this isn't a different processing crew. This is the same crew, Clay. These are the guys they were on the range with this. We'll remember who they are. We had a heifer come through the other day, and I picked out the steaks. I'm the steak picker in the freezer. And I put together these steaks. There's this one individual. We have several customers like this. This is his 156th order, with us. Every time he orders $800 for us. Okay. So we're putting his box together. He ordered some really nice ribeyes. The guy's got money. Okay. I don't get to eat ribeyes. He does. Okay. So anyway, I pick out these ribeyes and I put them out and I show the crew. I said, you got to check out these ribeyes. And they're all prime. Okay. They're all just beautiful prime ribeyes. If you want to put it in show notes, I get a picture of them because we took a picture of them. So let me know. But anyway, they're all prime. And, the kids are like, I got to know who that is. So I look it up. We got everything on Google. All our records are on Google, Google Docs and Google Drive and Google Sheets. So I just scroll down through the Google Sheet and look at it. And I said, this is N203. And they're like, you are kidding. And they remembered this heifer from 2 years on the range camping with her up there. It was a heifer. For 2 years on the range, they camped with this heifer. They exactly knew what she looked like. This is out of 400 head a year. These kids remember. So they got this follow through, and people are like, crap, $470,000. Yeah, it's a lot of labor, but they all are connected with the whole thing. And there's enough money at the end to pay their paychecks because, granted, that's a huge cost. But you know what these kids are? You know what they're becoming, Clay?
Mm-hmm.
They're becoming the husbandry practitioners. They're connecting all the dots. And this is missing in this generation, right?
Yeah.
This is missing in this young generation. We're missing this. We're getting them into, tillage or power equipment or hay equipment or, just inappropriate stockmanship of cattle. I'll just say that. To where cattle are being treated like a commodity, then it's wellness investment where you can really bless people. You can really bless people with an animal that's raised well, with the attitude of husbandry and that spirit of husbandry, where these animals, we work horseback all the time. All right. But these cattle are so used to us that they don't freak out. The mama cows we keep wild on purpose because there's so much instinct in them that's valuable for us. We don't worry about coyotes. We don't worry about all this other crap. We got wolves. We don't worry about any of it because these mama cows are terrors, okay? And part of it is because we don't ever think with them while we're tagging or whatever. We don't sort for disposition. We actually like it when they're mean, okay? It's a good thing. So, I mean, we're on horseback.
If you're not running them through the corrals 8 times a year, you can stand to have a little bit more.
We don't scour guard. We don't do any of that stuff. We don't do any of it. We don't even do porons. We don't do any of those things. And it's because, let me give you an example. I was with Dr. Fred Provenza. He's been on our range a bunch of times. I don't know if you know him. He's a professor emeritus out of Utah State. He's written this book called Nourishment. Fantastic, super. He's one of these people you're like, when you hang out with him, Clay, I don't know if you've hung out with him. It's one of those deals where you just, where you feel this voice inside you that says, just shut up. Just shut up and listen. Okay? That's Fred. Just shut up and listen.
The same one I'm hearing now.
I don't think so. But anyway, just shut up and listen. Anyway, we're up there and there's a steer just down the hill from us. And I said, what are you looking at, Fred? He said, well, watch what that steer's eating. And we're up clear at 7,800 feet, high mountain country. And he said, look at that. And I said, well, what? And he said, well, he's eating the yarrow and he's eating that ceanothus, which I didn't think he'd eat. And he said, that's got a lot of terpenes and tannins in this plant, And then this animal goes over some brit of brush, starts grazing on that. And Fred's like, this is really cool because you're able to observe this. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. He said, what you're looking at is they're taking all these terpenes and tannins. And he said, that's going to end up in your bloodstream. I said, my bloodstream? He said, ultimately, yes, in your bloodstream. Okay. But it's in that animal's bloodstream right now. It's in that steer's bloodstream. And he said, now I want you to look at the fly count on his back. Because he said, I know you're organic and I know you do nothing. And I said, I don't do anything. He said, look at the fly count. How many? I said, there is none. He said, there's no flies. And he said, now what I want you to look at is the licking pattern across that animal. And this steer's beautiful. Weighs probably around 1,200 pounds up there, 7,800 feet. And it's literally glistening. And he said, look carefully at the hair on that steer. This is August, okay? And there's these little droplets, Clay, and Fred showed them to me. He said, look at the little droplets. And there's these little droplets at the end of the hairs. And he said, I don't know, because there's no data. I think that's the terpenes. That's the tannins. These animals are self-medicating against things like flies. And he said, I don't know if the chemicals get there by their tongue and saliva because of the lick marks, or if they're actually coming through their skin to the ends of their hairs. He said, that's cool. I said, I can't tell you how cool it is.
Yeah.
So, and here we are. We're back into this place where we haven't reductionalized this cattle. We haven't put them in a feedlot. We've let them live in a natural environment, and it's so exciting to me because they are part of the ecosystem. They're able to reap the benefits of the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And, you see these things and it's, you know what it is? It's just beautiful design, Clay. Mm-hmm. I'd like to take credit, but this whole thing's humbling. This whole idea of husbandry has been really humbling for me. And I keep trying to get my brain better around it. Because you realize you really are no good at this. Because it's about you stepping back. It's not about your management emphasis. It's about your ability to shut up and listen. And it is only Fred. It's that design around you. Yeah. You get that ecosystem functional. You get it working. The wolves are with us now. You know what? The kids heard them howling a lot this summer, and everybody's like, well, did you kill them? And I said, no, we don't need to. We're okay with that because we're part of that ecosystem. Yep. I don't have any adverse thing about wolves anymore. I used to hate them. I used to hate them. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, no, they're part of this thing up there, and we're part of it too.
Yep.
The humans, not the cattle. The humans, we're part of it too.
Yep. There's so much here, but I think where I'll go is the fact that, you talked a little bit, and I think this is really well connected to what we've been talking about here. You've talked a little bit about the fact that you're not somebody who wants to go back to 300 years before, we came here, before white settlers showed up and want to revert back to that. You're not that person. And I think that here's the deal. In those days, there wasn't as large of a population of Native Americans as there is now. And there was, as there are people on the continent now.
Yes.
And there was way more of these predatory species in there now. And so the bison herd population was managed by the wolves, right?
Yes.
And we now are the managers of that herd population, because if you look at the numbers, we have just about as many cattle on the land now as there were bison then. And so now we are the ones who are managing. And I believe, according to God's design, you've brought to my mind Psalm 19, and Psalm 19 talks about God's two great books, The first one is creation, and it is speaking day after day, night after night. It's pouring forth speech to the glory of God. And then his second great book is his special revelation in the Word of God, the Bible, the 66 books of the Old and New Testament. And so you're bringing that to my mind, and I really believe that we are our responsibility as humans is to make this land better than we found it. To leave it better than we found it, not to extract things from it, not to reduce it to, some set of things that we can exert our influence on or our management on, but to make it better. And we can do that if we're willing to humble ourselves and think these cows were designed by God with a lot of really good instincts, and we can let them express those instincts, and we can be there to make sure that they're not vulnerable to predators or whatever else, because without you there, your losses would still be huge. Your losses to the wolves would still be huge, but you're there.
No, you're 100%. 100%.
And mankind isn't an evolved accident. Mankind is part of God's designed, created order. In my opinion, he's the pinnacle of it. Honestly, it was the last act of his creation, is mankind, and he put us here to manage it, to steward it, to husband it, and I love that word. I think stewardship has gotten overused to some degree, and so husbanding goes back to that. Let's serve. Here's what husband means to me: serve your family by leading them.
Yes.
And here's what husbanding means on the landscape: serve that landscape by leading it, by humbling yourself to the point to give up the control that you shouldn't try to take, and to let the animals do the work, and to also direct those animals in the way that you're not grazing the same patch of land at the same time every year, or I don't remember what it is in your case, but it's a number of years before you come back to the same patch of land at the same time. So I mean, all of those things. That's what I'm thinking of as I listen to you talk.
No, that's really cool. Here's the other thing too about that, Clay. With husbands, if you go back to the biblical definition, I think it was the Apostle Paul implores husbands to love their wives like Christ loved the church. And so you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, you just go to the point of the cross and say, well, Christ died. He died for the church. I mean, we're to die. This is dying to ourselves. This is like humility with that word husbandry, and I think that same thing connotes a relationship to the land. It's dying to ourselves. It's shutting up and listening and learning. One thing that people often say to me when we talk in these circles, it's like, oh, Glenn, that's a great idea. The great idea, but you're never going to feed anybody this way. You're never going to feed the people except the elite few that buy your beef. But I got to convey this. It's actually really simple. You talked, the thing that came in mind right away was that you talked about running about the same amount of cattle as there were bison. All right. So right now, the United States cattle herd is around 97 million head. I think it's down by 1 or 2 points, probably closer to 95, 96 million head. That's everybody. Okay. That's calves, cows, dairy steers, cattle and feedlots. That's the whole shooting match of bovines in the United States of America is 96 and change, somewhere in there. I don't know the exact number because I don't watch cattle on feed reports or stock inventory reports all the time. But just that number, kind of comes to mind. So when we started on this new ranch in 2005, we took some soil tests, 2.45 average soil organic matter. And this isn't including the range. I'm just talking about the bottom ground. There's about 450 acres of that.
And are those pivot irrigated?
Now, most of that's irrigated, yes.
Yep.
So, it's analogous to anywhere where you'd have rainfall.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a lot of...
Missouri.
Missouri. So equivalent of water is probably 32, 30 25 to 32 inches. I would submit to you that we're probably a little less just because of our dry climate. That might be water that hits the ground, but I know I'm losing stuff to evaporation right away.
Humidity does something for you in those contexts where it rains more, and you're not generating humidity.
No, even where you live, Clay, you got higher RH than we do. We lose it all. We're like 15, 25% on a humid day. There's a lot of days we're in single digits. I've been, around your country there. Are you still around Belle Fourche? Yeah,
I'm northeast of there now, but yeah. 70 miles.
So say around Belle Fourche. I've been in Belle Fourche when it's like 85% humid. It can get up.
You felt like you needed gills to walk down the sidewalk.
So anyway, here we are then with like 20 inches of water hitting the ground. So that can be, stretched to a whole bunch of the United States in terms of effective precipitation, everywhere from California to New York State or whatever. So, but on that ground now, we did another organic matter test last year, 65 different plots across the irrigated part of the ranch. Right now, we're at 7.75. Some of that ground is 17% organic matter, up from 2.4. Okay, and it's just this happened completely by accident. This was just because we're practicing rotational grazing. I'm going to call it that. You can call it 100 million different things. It's just rotational grazing. That's a whole nother podcast. And I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people about that. But anyway, just rotational grazing got us there. Okay. Just that graze quickly and rest. That's it. Short duration, high intensity, long rest period grazing. Okay. Same thing we're practicing on the range, but that's a whole different environment. That's not part of this calculation. So anyway, soil organic matter change. So when I saw that soil organic matter come in, I said, it feels like we're running more cattle. Back in 2005, we're running it was half a cow per acre. Now we're pushing almost one. Okay. And it's because of us investing in the soils, not by applying things or products or gizmos or whatever to the soil. It's just by using animals to graze. Okay. We made it able to double our stocking rate. It was like getting another ranch for free. That's one reason we're profitable. We can run many more cattle than we used to. So now on that 450 acres, we can run one cow on the average per acre on that irrigated ground. This is calculating all the dry matter and boiling it back to how many cows we could sustain. This includes the hay crop, whatever else you're going to take off. So anyway, one cow per acre, Clay. Okay, 20-inch precip. We're at 5,000 feet. Okay, 5,000 feet. Short growing season. You got growing seasons all over the United States that are like almost year round, especially across southern tier. Everything from Texas to Florida. Okay, so anyway, take that one cow per acre. Okay, now let's just look at the corn ground. Okay, the corn ground right now in the United States is 96 million acres. 96 million acres of corn. Okay. Let's just say we're not going to, let's do this instead. Let's take the bean ground. The bean ground is 85,000 or 85 million acres right now in the U.S. today. 85 million acres in soybeans. Let's just say we're going to pull soybeans out of the equation for now, and we're just going to convert that to this kind of pasture. Yes, we're going to have to invest in it. Yes, we're going to have to build those soils, but we're just going to, you're going to be able to run 85 million head of cattle on just the soybean ground. So a lot of people say to me, this can't feed people. But if we just take the soybean ground, that means we're not even using the pasture. Right now, there's a total of 950 million acres in farm ground in America. 950 million acres. Of it is 96 million in corn, 85 million in soybeans. We're just going to pull the soybean ground out of that 950. It's less than a tenth. And we're going to be able to feed all these cattle, the 96 million. This is the dairy cattle. This is all of them, Clay. I mean, yeah, I know this is simplistic, but I just want to throw that out there to your listeners and say, yes, we can do this. We can abandon feedlots. We can abandon corn culture. We could use all the corn for ethanol, Clay. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We don't want to go into that discussion, but it's a whole nother can of worms, right? So, but let's just say, we're going to abandon all the concrete. We're going to abandon all the feedlots. We're just going to say we're going to raise them all in grass, but we got to get our soils there. We got to get our soils there to that 1 cow per acre productivity. A lot of people, in the Southeast are already there because they get rainfall, right? Mm-hmm. They're already at 1 cow per acre. We're in a high elevation climate. So what I'm saying is the whole thing that, this kind of agriculture, this kind of husbandry, this kind of connection with the land and building those soils can't feed America. It can totally feed America, Clay. It can totally do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got to think differently about what our land looks like.
Yeah.
A lot of our land in America today, a lot of that agriculture ground in the 960 million acres is 1% soil organic matter.
Yep. And you can double.
Say, I don't care about. You might say, I don't care about soil organic matter, but it's a measure of your life, right? It's your measure of soil microbial activity.
Right. Over a couple of years of different management, you could double the productivity or the carrying capacity of that land too. Right.
Yes.
I mean, and so it's not a question of can we do it? It's do we want to do it? That's really the question. It has nothing to do with can we do it. It's do we want to do it? And here's the other thing that this podcast has facilitated for me over the last couple of years is that we get stuck in this rut and we think that the way that we've been doing it now is the way that it's always been. Well, you're talking to me about your dad in 1930s in the northern part of the Netherlands with cows that were producing 30 pounds of milk a day, right?
Yes.
And then you just go a few years ahead of that and we get to World War II. Pre-World War II, the majority of a farm's income came in the form of protein, chickens, hogs, beef, walked off the farm by its end consumer.
Yes.
And so, I mean, we're not that far removed from it. Now, is there a lot of inertia? Yeah, there's a heck of a lot of inertia.
Absolutely.
In the wrong direction. But if we got rid of the soybeans, maybe the seed oils in the grocery store would cost $15 a quart instead of $3, and maybe fewer people would be able to. Maybe we'd have less externalized costs, and we'd recognize what it actually costs to eat this way, and we'd stop eating things cooked We'd stop eating things wrapped in plastic, and we'd start eating things that spent every day of their life, and we'd be able to afford to because it would be the same price. And it turns out that I'm full longer when I eat this way, and I don't have to eat as much, and I'm healthier, and the inflammation goes away, and, just keep on calling the roll of the benefits of doing this. That's why I really appreciate your language. This isn't my food budget. It's my wellness investment.
Yes.
Yes. It's and what is the opposite of a wellness investment? It's a pharmaceutical investment. It's a sickness investment, and that's really what most people's food budget is.
It's full on reactivity instead of proactivity.
Yep.
And we try to be proactive in agriculture all the time. We're making plans about the next year and all this stuff, and yet, in our American genome, we do all this. We do all this planning, but for some reason we fail to take wellness, our personal wellness, our family's wellness, the wellness of the land in a proactive context. We're reactive to everything.
Yep. Glenn, you and I could talk for a long time, and I would love to do it again sometime, and in less than 225 episodes or whatever this is going to net out to be since last time we talked, but
there's a lot of people out there, Clay.
Right. Exactly.
Every one of them is worth listening to, because, I mean, I think if I have a podcast, it's going to be entitled "Shut Up and Listen."
Yep. No.
Because man, surround yourself with people, in this podcast that are those kind of people.
Yep.
Those kind of people where you just want to be a sponge and just receive, because there's so much to be had out there.
Humility.
And that actually is part of our design, Clay.
Mm-hmm.
We're designed to receive information. We're designed to receive knowledge. That's why we got these senses: eyes, ears, nose, mouth, right? And
Very good. Glenn, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's been fantastic, Clay.
Very good stuff there with Glenn. Really appreciate just the way he thinks, again, as I said in the intro, and then also just the way that he puts those things together. And just really a neat guy, and the way it all connects back to God's word and God's design for the world, and our relationship to the world as creation, as created in God's image, and those things. So really enjoyed that conversation. Going to take a little bit of a different approach next week on the Working Cows podcast. We're going to talk to a guy by the name of David Bahnsen, and maybe some of you are familiar with that last name Bahnsen from his father, Greg Bahnsen, and maybe you're familiar with David too. But David is a really interesting thinker around the issue of work, and what is work, and how do we faithfully execute our work. And really what we're going to talk to David about is how being created in the image of God informs our work. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. He's got a new book coming out called Full Time. It should be out this week as you're listening to this. By the time we record and release the episode, it will be already out, and you'll be all ready to get your copy of that book. And so we're going to talk to him about that. I'm really excited for this conversation with David Bahnsen coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.